All right, so Donald Trump's former defense secretary, Mark Esper, is apparently releasing a book. I think it comes out today. And in this book, he makes some pretty wild accusations about things that Donald Trump wanted to do as the president that he was basically blocked from doing for very obvious reasons. But here to start us off from the week, they say that Trump wanted to quietly bomb Mexico. Seriously, ex-defense secretary Mark Esper recounts. He wanted to bomb Mexico to go after the drug cartels. So let's go ahead and read into some of this insanity. They say, in the summer of 2020, unhappy about the flow of drugs across the U.S.-Mexico border, then President Donald Trump asked his defense secretary Mark Esper if the U.S. military could shoot missiles into Mexico to destroy the drug labs, Esper writes in his forthcoming memoir of working for the Trump administration. And Trump made this request at least twice, and after Esper pushed back with several objections, Trump suggested we could just shoot some Patriot missiles and take out the labs quietly. We are going to shoot missiles into an allied country, Mexico, without warning them, and we're going to do it quietly. And he said, and no one would know that it was us, Esper writes in a sacred oath, the New York Times reports. And Esper writes, he would have thought it was a joke had he not been staring Mr. Trump in the face, the Times reports. And while straining to be fair to Trump and giving him any credit he deserves no credit for fucking anything, but Esper paints a portrait of someone not in control of his emotions or his thought process throughout 2020, especially after his first impeachment trial, the Times reports, and he also singles out officials whom he considered erratic or dangerous influences on Trump, and advisor Stephen Miller is near the top of the list. Not surprising at all. Stephen Miller is probably the single most easily identifiable, ontologically evil person within Trump's administration. I mean, dude is a straight up white supremacist, but they continue saying in an interview with CBS News, Norah O'Donnell, set to air on Sunday night, Esper says that he was flabbergasted by Miller's suggestion to send 250,000 U.S. troops to the Mexico border. Miller wanted to send 250,000 troops to what? Go to war with Mexico, I guess, on the border? And he said, I think he's joking, Esper recounts. And then I turn around and I look at him in these deadpan eyes that he has all the time, and it's clear that he's not joking. And they say in his book, Esper writes that he told Miller, the U.S. Armed Forces don't have 250,000 troops to send to the border for such nonsense. So, he's pointing out the fact that we don't have the numbers for it, instead of, I guess, attacking the insanity of that idea as a concept on principles. But they say Esper also recounts how Miller suggested after U.S. Special Forces killed Islamic State leader Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, that the U.S. cut off al-Baghdadi's head and dip it in pig's blood as a warning to other Islamic terrorists. Stephen Miller legitimately proposed sending 250,000 troops to the U.S.-Mexico border and to cut off the head of a terrorist, an al-Baghdadi terrorist, to cut off his head and to dip it in pig's blood. Okay, obviously a war crime, obviously completely horrific, but this is what was being floated literally by cabinet members within the Trump administration. And Esper told Miller that it would be a war crime. Yes, obviously, although the Trump administration, the Obama, the Biden, the Bush administration have never had any principled stance against war crimes, but they say Miller denied the episode and told the Times that Esper is a moron, so of course he's going to be denying that, but not exactly something that I would push past or put past somebody like Stephen Miller saying, suggesting this type of thing. And they finish here saying, but Esper's main concern is Trump, and he ran his manuscript by more than 24 four-star generals plus cabinet ministers and others to make sure his book is accurate and fair. Trump, he tells the Times, is an unprincipled person who, given his self-interest, should not be in the position of public service. So yeah, I mean, no shit. Donald Trump doesn't have any underlying principles. He just wanted to rise to the position of the president so he could basically give a fuck you to the Democratic establishment, and he ended up using this as an opportunity to make himself, I guess, sort of a cult-like figure within the Republican Party, but he doesn't have any principled stance on any policy issues. So, I'm thinking back to the times where people were legitimately trying to suggest that Donald Trump was like the most anti-war president in modern American history, which, listen, you're not really comparing him to anybody that's even a fair bar to cross if you're comparing him to the Bush administration or even Obama and his drone program, etc. But, Donald Trump was never a principled anti-war person, right? He nominally began the process of pulling us out of Afghanistan, but he was too much of a coward to let it happen under his administration. Then he turned around and basically lambasted Biden for all of the failures surrounding that pullout. So he's not an anti-war person by any stretch of the imagination. And if anything, he's arguably, at least with what he wanted to do and was prevented from doing, probably would have been the single most disastrous president in modern American history on foreign policy if he was actually able to go the full extent and do things like he's suggesting here. Literally literally bombing a US ally, one of our biggest, if not our single biggest trading partner outside of maybe China, in Mexico, okay? This is what he was suggesting, legitimately suggesting, not sarcastically or floating it out there as a joke, but him and Stephen Miller teaming up to basically, I don't know, completely destroy any semblance of stability that we have in the North American continent. But this is exactly what he was suggesting, just absolutely wild shit. Now, you might be wondering, how can we know whether or not that this is a legitimate quote or that he was really trying to push for something? Well, the suggestion that he thinks that you could simply bomb another country and that they would never find out that it was the United States, or that you could, pretend like it was some other country. I think he suggested, let's accuse it of being Nicaraguan planes that were doing these bombing campaigns, etc., in Mexico. But the reason that you know that this is a legitimate thing that Donald Trump did behind the scenes is because he just did this recently in regards to the Russian invasion of Ukraine. So this just came out a couple months ago. Before he says Trump muses here from the Washington Post about a really bad and evidently illegal idea to bomb Russia using Chinese flags. So listen, in the wake of the Russian invasion of Ukraine, Donald Trump was thinking about doing shit like this. So imagine if he had been in the position of the presidency during this Russian invasion of Ukraine. I mean, people like to pretend as if he's completely owned by Russia and that he's serving the interests of Vladimir Putin, but no, he would have gone in an even more hawkish direction than what the Biden administration is doing right now in regards to Ukraine, right? Giving them, or trying to give them, $33 billion in this new aid package, with a vast majority of it going to more military equipment. You got US officials and diplomats, as well as like UK officials, etc. All of our allies basically pushing Ukraine to extend the war, to continue the fighting, to not prioritizing pushing a diplomatic settlement by any stretch of the imagination. So even given that circumstance, even given the Biden administration's position on the Russian invasion of Ukraine, Donald Trump would have been even to the right of that. He would have been even more hawkish and would literally suggest, floating out the idea that we just secretly bomb Russia and then blame it on China, as if anybody would fucking believe that in the first place, or as if that wouldn't be an immediate escalation towards nuclear war and World War III. So Donald Trump, clearly a fucking, dangerous human being to have in this position of power. But just another example here of one of the leaks that we got from this same Mark Esper book. So this was another scoop. They say Esper says that Trump wanted to shoot protesters in the wake of the George Floyd murder. So here are a little bit of details on that. They say former Defense Secretary Mark Esper charges in a memoir out on May 10th, that's today, that former President Trump said when demonstrators were filling the streets around the White House following the death of George Floyd, can't you just shoot them? Just shoot them in the legs or something. Okay, so, very pro-freedom Republican Party that we have here. Donald Trump, who pretends like it's conservatives having their ideas or their belief system that's under attack, and there's this authoritarian crackdown that's only affecting conservatives and right-wingers. It's complete bullshit. They don't believe in freedom of speech. Donald Trump is literally floating out the idea of shooting peaceful protesters, okay? And we all know what happened when he left the White House to go and do that photo op where he held the Bible upside down, and, they tear-gassed peaceful protesters outside the White House in that circumstance. So we know that he doesn't believe in free speech, okay? He doesn't believe in the freedom to protest. He just wants to aggressively prosecute his political enemies, whether that's domestically or on an international basis. It doesn't matter, or even if it's a fucking ally in the case of Mexico, okay? So Donald Trump clearly doesn't have his fucking head on straight. That's very obvious. We've known that for basically his entire life. But on top of that, clearly he was floating things at the highest level of government that would have escalated into completely disastrous situations, whether that's on Russia pushing us towards nuclear war, whether that's on Mexico deciding to, wantonly violate international law and illegally bomb another country, or Stephen Miller suggesting we send 250,000 troops down to the border. And, listen, all of these things are like laughable at face value and also obviously dangerous in an underlying way. But at the same time, what is this actually even about? I mean, why would he want to bomb Mexico? Well, he claimed that he wanted to bomb Mexico to go after the drug cartels, which again is just part of this continuation of the drug war that has been wielded and was started under the Nixon administration, basically, specifically to persecute his political enemies at the time. So it all kind of comes full circle here with Donald Trump continuing to engage in a war on drugs, in this case when it would essentially be a literal war on drugs, engaging with military troops and positioning them on the border, as well as sending Patriot missiles in to bomb drug labs in Mexico somehow without them finding out that it was us. This is a continuation of the drug war, which is not only insane for all of the different reasons that we just said, but also just completely ineffective. I mean, if you actually wanted to take on the drug cartels, the way to do that is not to engage in this decades-long, endless series of fighting them, to pretend like, taking out certain drug lords or certain cartels is going to reduce the demand for drugs around the world. That's not going to tackle the problem. There is a demand for this, and so, of course, there's going to be groups that are going to meet that demand in providing the supply for the global drug trade. That is an inevitability. So the way that you actually would beat the drug cartels isn't by taking them on in a war, it's by taking their business, by decriminalizing and legalizing, depending on which drug you're talking about, all drugs across the board, okay? That's the process that you would actually engage in if you wanted to reduce the power, the influence, the violence surrounding all of these drug cartels. Take away their business, legalize these drugs, decriminalize this process, release all nonviolent drug offenders, and not only would that be a benefit on the drug war front and basically ending the drug war, but in addition to that, you would reduce, the amount of prisoners that we have for nonviolent drug offenses in prison. You would have massive tax benefits from the money that would be coming in from these legal drug markets here in the United States. So on every different front, not only is he dangerous, but he's also delusional and wrong about the efficacy of basically his entire agenda. I mean, whether it comes to economic policies, basically just doing trickle-down economics and Reaganomics, basically, or whether it's on foreign policy, where he's just wantonly trying to bomb other countries with, no anticipation of what the potential consequences could come from that. He just engages in this wild approach to policy decision-making that is completely incoherent and wildly dangerous.